Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Can somebody who is on the chat just confirm that you're able to hear me properly? Brother Sajid, if you're there, just want to make sure that my mic is functioning properly. Okay, Jazakallah khair. Inshallah, we will start. Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد، قال الله تعالى في القرآن المجيد بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا توبوا إلى الله توبة نصوحا صدق الله العلي العظيم. I pray all of you are doing good, inshallah, safe and healthy. So today, inshallah, we're going to go right to the topic, which is we're going to talk about an amazing story about a Sahabi. And it's a very, very interesting story. It's actually one of my favorite stories. And like I said, this is not a story that is very commonly talked about. You probably have heard it, but maybe not in so much detail. And if you did, you probably heard it a long time ago. So inshallah, it'll be a good refresher in case you already know the story. So this is a story of a Sahabi. His name was Ikrimah ibn Abi Jahl, radiyallahu anhu. So this is a very, very interesting story, because this story starts with obviously the story of Abu Jahl, right? Now, who was Abu Jahl? Most of us have heard about Abu Jahl, but remember Fir'aun, who we were talking about yesterday? Abu Jahl was the Fir'aun of this ummah. The Prophet ﷺ called him the Fir'aun of this ummah. Now this man, just like how we were saying that the Fir'aun was the prototype of a supervillain, this man was pretty much what the Fir'aun was for the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ. He was responsible for hurting the early Muslims in a way unimaginable. Right? He was the one who would torture people. The poor Muslims who didn't have any support, he would be basically torturing them. And he is pretty much the murderer of one of the first shaheed of Islam, who happened to be a woman. Her name was Sumayya radiallahu ta'ala, the mother of Ammar bin Yasir radiallahu ta'ala. He killed her basically. And he was a person who tortured many Muslims. He was the one who, when the Prophet ﷺ was praying once, had somebody get the intestines and the entrails of camel and put it on the neck of the Prophet ﷺ while he was praying. He was the one who was responsible for the boycott of the Muslims. The few years that the Muslims were totally boycotted from the Quraysh, he was one of the chief planners of that. And he was also one of the person who was completely behind the assassination attempt of the Prophet ﷺ. So you can understand that this man was not an ordinary kafir. Yani he was one of the worst enemies of Islam. And subhanAllah, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to give hidayah, he will pick and choose whomever he wants. The son of Abu Jahl, his own flesh and blood, ends up being a Muslim. And not just any Muslim, a very, very special and prominent Sahabi. And his name, again, was Ikrimah. So going to Ikrimah and his life. Now, Ikrimah radiallahu anhu, he was amongst the nobles of the Quraysh, right? He was the son of Abu Jahl, so naturally people are going to respect him. He was wealthy, his lineage was noble, and people respected him. And his father was a leader. So he followed the footsteps of his father. And he, with his father, continued to fight against the Prophet ﷺ. Now, if you look at his trajectory, and if you look at his history, it appears that he is basically going in a very, very wrong direction, right? The first was the Battle of Badr, right? When the Prophet ﷺ migrated to Medina al-Munawwara, that's when there was a direct clash between the Quraysh of Makkah and the Muslims, right? So the first was the Battle of Badr. Now, in the Battle of Badr, Ikrimah was side by side to his father. And Abu Jahl was killed in the Battle of Badr. He was killed in the Battle of Badr. And he was actually killed by two very young Ansari Sahaba. It's actually interesting how they killed him. They basically went to Abdullah ibn Masud anhu, and they asked him, do you know who Abu Jahl is? And these were two very, very young children. And then he said, what do you have to do with Abu Jahl? They said, we found out that Abu Jahl used to hurt the Prophet ﷺ. And if we find him, and Abdullah ibn Masud asked them, what would you do if you find him? He said, if we find him, we're not going to let him alive. We're not going to leave him alive. We're basically going to kill him. So when Abdullah ibn Masud anhu finds out where Abu Jahl is, he just points him. He just points him, that's Abu Jahl. And they basically rush there and they kill him. They actually don't kill him, they wound him. They seriously wound him. One of them hits the leg of Abu Jahl, and that's the first blow that Abu Jahl gets. And when he does that, Ikrimah tries to defend his father, and he actually hurts this young lad. So that was him trying to defend his father. And then finally, Abu Jahl basically gets killed. Abdullah ibn Masud finally kills him. And it's very interesting because this man was so evil that Fir'aun, when he was about to die, when he was about to drown, in the end, he accepted. He said, I believe in the God that the children of Israel believe in the Bani Israel believe in. Because he obviously saw everything, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, no, now you believe. At this time, there's no, because you've already seen the truth, so there's no point in you believing now. But Abu Jahl was such a tyrant that when he was dying, even at that time, when Abdullah ibn Masud was about to give him the final blow, he said, he basically was telling Abdullah ibn Masud, you're a lucky man because you're getting to kill such a man like me, such a prominent man like me. That's how arrogant he was. So that's when the Prophet ﷺ said that he is the Fir'aun of this ummah. So anyways, Ikrimah at that time was amongst the Quraysh trying to defend his father. The second battle was the Battle of Uhud. And in the Battle of Uhud, again, he was one of the leaders, one of the chief leaders of the Quraysh, again, fighting against the Muslims. And it was in that battle that his friend and Ikrimah had a very good friend whose name was Khalid bin Walid. Both of them were very, very tight. So Khalid bin Walid, obviously, in the Battle of Uhud, dealt a big blow to the Muslims. And then thirdly, he participated in the Battle of Khandaq. Now, the Battle of Khandaq, if you remember, was the Battle of the Trench, when the Quraysh were trying to attack Medina al-Munawwara. So, on the advice of Salman al-Farsi, the Prophet ﷺ dug or had a trench dug in front of Medina al-Munawwara, so that when the Quraysh came, they weren't able to enter it. So during this battle, the trench was fairly deep, and it wasn't easy to just jump in it or jump above it. So Ikrimah, in spite of that, and you can see he's a brave man. He wasn't afraid. He took a couple of people and he tried to pass that trench, but soon he realized it wasn't a smart move because the Muslims started attacking him, and he left. So he wasn't killed there. So as you can see, this is a man that is consistently trying to fight the Muslims, and he is an enemy to the Prophet ﷺ. And then finally comes the Sulh al-Hudaybiyah, and then the Fath al-Makkah, the conquest of Makkah. That's when the Prophet ﷺ enters as a victor, into the city of Makkah, and now he has forgiven everybody. Everybody is told that you're forgiven. La tathriba alaykum. The ayah of the Quran that Yusuf alayhi salam basically tells his brothers when they come to him, Prophet ﷺ says the same ayah, and he says everybody is forgiven. Now, in spite of that, Ikrimah was such an enemy of Islam that he tried to attack the Muslims even then. Even though the Quraysh, by consensus, said we're not going to fight the Muslims anymore, he gathers a small group and he tries to attack. And Khalid bin Walid, who used to be his friend, because by this time Khalid bin Walid is now Muslim, he drives them away. So because of all of these crimes, even though the Prophet ﷺ said the entire people of Makkah are forgiven, there are a couple of people who are on the most wanted list. And these people, their crimes are so bad that no matter what they do, they're still going to be killed. To a point that even if they're found holding the ghilaf of the Kaaba, the cloth of the Kaaba, they're still going to be killed. That's how bad they are. And amongst them was Ikrimah. And there were a few others. And it's interesting, amongst those people, a lot of them got forgiven as well. A few of them got killed, a few of them got forgiven, even amongst those people. So anyways, Ikrimah now knew that he had no chance. He had absolutely no chance. If he's going to be in Makkah, he's dead. So what does he do? He flees. He flees Makkah, and he's now trying to go to Yemen. And he just wants to basically leave Arabia. He cross the sea and just leave Arabia. So now something very interesting happens. So Ikrimah's wife, her name is, or her kunya is Hakim. And she was a very intelligent woman. Now she's seen, that Islam is now dominant, Islam is now conquered. And more than that, she sees the mercy of the Prophet ﷺ. She sees the truth in Islam. She sees the behavior of the Muslims. She says, this is the truth. I have to accept it. So what does she do? She goes behind Hind radiallahu ta'ala. Now Hind is the wife of Abu Sufyan radiallahu ta'ala. And at this time, these are all people who are not yet Muslim, right? And Hind radiallahu ta'ala decided that she's going to be a Muslim. And she goes to the Prophet ﷺ and she says, O Messenger of Allah, I am ready to believe you. I am now a believing woman and I affirm your truth. And she is wailed at the time. And then when the Prophet ﷺ accepts her, she unveils her and says, I am Hind, the daughter of Utbah. And the Prophet ﷺ says, welcome. Now, as soon as the Prophet ﷺ does that, Hakim is just right behind her. She gets up and she says, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. She accepts the deen. So the Prophet ﷺ now is basically accepting everybody who's coming. And then she asks the Prophet ﷺ, she says, O Messenger of Allah, Ikrimah has fled from you to Yemen out of the fear that you would kill him. Can you grant him security? So the Prophet ﷺ said, he is secure. So look at the mercy of the Prophet ﷺ, that in spite of the fact that this man had been a constant enemy throughout, when his wife came to the Prophet ﷺ and asked him just once, she didn't even have to plead, she didn't even have to ask multiple times. Immediately the Prophet ﷺ said, okay, he is secure. The Prophet ﷺ made a promise. Now, Hakim immediately set out in search of Ikrimah radiallahu anhu. At this time, of course, he's still just running away, trying to escape the Muslims, right? So she runs, and as she's doing so, she grabs, or not grabs, but basically she is accompanied by her slave. So they have a slave, and she takes the slave, and she's running, trying to catch a hold of him before he leaves. So when they go for a little distance, this slave was not a good person. So he tries to do inappropriate things with her. So basically what she does is, she's also smart, she manages to put him off until she comes to some familiar people, and she says, this man is trying to harass me, and then they tie up that slave, and then she goes on herself. And finally she finds him right about, they say that it was the region of the Red Sea, at the region of Tihama. So there are two reports right now as to what happened. One of the report is Ikrimah already boards the ship. He already boards the ship, and then he goes on, he sails forth. And that ship is caught in a storm. And in this storm, Ikrimah realizes, okay, I cannot escape from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his plan. At that point, he makes a promise to himself, oh Allah, if you get me back alive, then I will believe in the Prophet and I'll become Muslim. That's one report. The second report is he doesn't get on the ship, but he's negotiating with the seaman, or the sailor who's going to take him to the ship. And interestingly, this man happens to be a Muslim. So this person says, this Muslim sailor, he says to him, I'll transport you, but I have a condition, that you become pure and sincere. And Ikrimah says, how can I be pure? He says, in order for you to be pure, you have to say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah. And Ikrimah says, okay, what's going on? This is the very thing I'm trying to run away from. This is really what I don't want to do. And as this conversation is happening, who comes from behind? His wife. His wife comes from behind and she calls on to him. And it's very interesting the way she calls on to him. She says, "Oh my cousin." She doesn't say, "Oh my husband." She says, "Oh my cousin," because they're related as cousins. He says, "Oh my cousin, I have come to you from the most generous of and the most righteous of men, Muhammad ibn Abdullah. And and interestingly, look at this. She has not told him yet that she's become Muslim, right? She said, "Oh my cousin, I came to you from the best of people, Muhammad ibn Abdullah, and I asked him that he grants security to you. And he has done that. So don't destroy yourself, come back with me." And now Ikrimah is surprised. He's completely shocked. Really? I mean, he's actually said that he's going to let me go. And she says, "Did you speak to him personally?" He says, "Yes, I have spoken to him and he has given you security." She assures him. And then he says, she says to him, "Come with me." Now, as they're going back, she tells him about that slave, the slave that they had, and that slave tried to dishonor her. And Ikrimah immediately goes to that person, he takes care of him. All right. When that happens, as they're traveling back, Ikrimah radiallahu anhu now goes to his wife and he wants to spend some time with her, as a husband and wife would do. But when he comes to her, that's when she tells him, "Ikrimah, I am a Muslim and you are a mushrik and you cannot come close to me." And immediately he's shocked. He's shocked because this is a revelation to him. His own wife is telling him, "No, you are now no longer," essentially she's telling him, "You're no longer my husband." And then at that point he says, "Look, I cannot live without you." That's an impossible situation. He really loved his wife that much. So let's go to Makkah and we'll figure this out. And you can see how interesting his wife, the interesting way that his wife gave him da'wah. So this is one of the lessons, that with a pious spouse, how a person can turn the life of his or her spouse in a better way and guide them. So now they return back to Makkah al-Mukarramah. And as they come back, Ikrimah bin Abi Jahl is now coming to the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ is seated with his companions. Imagine what kind of a scene that would be, right? Ikrimah is walking. And who is Ikrimah? He's not just any guy, right? He's a guy who's fought them in Badr, who's fought them in Uhud, who's fought them in Khandaq, and even after Fateh Makkah, he's trying to fight them. And his father is the Fir'aun of this ummah. You can imagine how the Sahaba might have felt. And the Prophet ﷺ had initially said he had a death warrant. But as he's coming, what does the Prophet ﷺ tell to them? Do not insult his father. Do not insult his father. Insulting the dead causes grief to the living and doesn't reach the dead. So don't say anything to him. So this is the amazing mercy of the Prophet ﷺ and his akhlaq. And then the Prophet ﷺ then predicts, he says, Ikrimah bin Abi Jahl will come to you as a believer and as a muhajir. So as Ikrimah comes to the Prophet ﷺ, he says to the Prophet ﷺ, Muhammad, my wife has told me that you have granted me security. Prophet ﷺ says, that's right, you are safe. And then he says, what do you invite me to? Prophet ﷺ says, I invite you to testify that there is no one worthy of worship except Allah, and I am the slave of Allah and his messenger. I am the slave of Allah and his messenger. Sorry about that. I was checking a message over here. Okay. So when the Prophet ﷺ gives him that da'wah, Ikrimah basically says, by Allah, you have always called to what is true and you've always commanded to what is good. You've lived amongst us before the start of your mission and we knew that you are the most trustworthy. And this is something that we have to understand. The Quraysh of Makkah never really doubted the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ was such a truthful person that when he came with the message of Islam, in reality, even Abu Jahl would say, who's saying that Muhammad is lying? We know that he doesn't lie. We know he's speaking the truth, but they were just arrogant. They just did not want to give their power away. They just did not want to believe because pure arrogance was what it was. So now Ikrimah is saying, look, I knew from day one that you are speaking to the truth. And then he says the kalima, he says, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. And then he asked Prophet ﷺ, and this is something beautiful. What he does, and Khalid bin Walid, his bosom buddy, he also does the same thing. He says, O Messenger of Allah, can you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive me for all the hostility I directed against you and all the insults I expressed against you, whether it was in your presence or in your absence? Prophet ﷺ says, O Allah, forgive Ikrimah for all the hostility and whatever he basically did to harm the Muslims. And then he makes a promise. Now, this is a very, very interesting promise. And I want you guys to listen to this. He says, by Allah. He's now making a vow. He's now making a promise. Ya Rasulullah, I promise that whatever I have spent obstructing the way of Allah, I will spend twice as much in His path. And whatever battles I fought against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Muslims, I will fight twice as much in His way. So this is His redemption. This is His promise. This is His promise. Right? He says, this is the bad that I did. Now I'm going to do twice as much as good. The question now is, what does he do after that? Does he live up to his promise? Fast forward. We're now in the Khilafah of Umar radiallahu anhu. The Prophet has passed away. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu has passed away. I'm trying to think if Yarmouk was in the time of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu or Umar radiallahu anhu. I'm not sure, but one of the two. Anyways, this is basically after the Prophet passed away. And this is the battle of Yarmouk. Now, in this battle, Khalid bin Walid radiallahu anhu, he is the general. And as we all know, Khalid bin Walid radiallahu anhu was one of the most brilliant generals that the world has ever seen. Even if you look at non-Muslim literature, he had perfected the art of a very, very small army being able to attack a large army and overpowering them. And he had an amazing methodology. As a matter of fact, if you have some time, you should look at the details of the Battle of Yarmouk. The Muslims were facing an impossible odds. I think the Muslims army, they say it was anywhere between 20 to 40,000, and the non-Muslim army was over 100,000. So you can just imagine the odds. So Khalid would use his cavalry in such a way where it would appear that he's getting reinforcements, right? He would make a sort of illusion that the enemy would think that he's getting reinforced from the back. Newer forces are coming, although it was the same force. So it was just during this battle that Ikrimah was also a part of this battle. Now, I believe it was a day 3 or day 4 of this battle. And it was almost one of the decisive days. And at this point, the Muslims were suffering quite a bit. And Ikrimah looked at the situation and he said, listen, at this point, someone has to make a sacrifice. Someone has to make a sacrifice. So he goes to Khalid and said, Khalid, I am now going to go head on. I'm going to go head on and I'm going to take in the army together. And then he basically calls out and he says, who shall pledge with me to fight until death? So there are about 400 people that say, we're ready for this. We're ready for this. So what's happening is basically the Muslim army is almost at a verge of defeat. And now you need this onslaught that could essentially hold the army of the Byzantines. That's where they're fighting. And Ikrimah basically knows that he has to sacrifice himself if he wants this to turn from a defeat to a victory. So 400 people respond to his call. Now Khalid doesn't want him to do that. He says, Ikrimah, don't do this. We still need you. We still need you. And then he says, no, Khalid, let me carry on. You had the privilege of being with the Prophet ﷺ. And as for myself and my father, we were amongst his bitterest enemies. Now leave me to atone for what I've done in the past. I fought with the Prophet ﷺ on many occasions. Now shall I flee from these enemies? Never. Then he called out to his army and he said, who is going to fight with me? And like I said, 400 Muslims. They went on to him. And amongst them was Ayyash ibn Abi Rabi'a and Harith ibn Hisham. So they go on. And that is what completely turns the tide of the battle. The Muslims, who are now in a position of almost defeat, completely turn around. Khalid bin Walid basically is able to maneuver the army, and now they are now on upper hand. And amongst the 400 people, most of them pass away. Most of the 400 people that went on to face the army, they pass away. Ikrimah radiallahu anhu also passes away in this battle. And the way that he passes away is also interesting. Harith, Ayyash, and Ikrimah radiallahu anhu, all three of them are cousins. And all three of them basically are wounded and are dying. So when the Muslims went to look at whoever was wounded, they found Harith, and he was about at the verge of his death. And he called for water because he was thirsty. He called for water. And as a person came to give him water, he looked at his cousin Ayyash and he says, give the water to him. And then the person took the water to Ayyash. And as he was about to give him the water, he radiallahu anhu looked at Ikrimah radiallahu anhu, who's also dying. And he said, go give it to him. And then that person took the water to Ikrimah radiallahu anhu. And even before Ikrimah radiallahu anhu could drink that water, he passed away. And then the person went to Ayyash, he passed away, and then he went to Harith, he passed away. So all three of them passed away, preferring the others to themselves. And none of them drank water on their last breath. So that is the story of Ikrimah radiallahu anhu. The person who in the beginning was the staunchest enemy of Islam and then became the savior and the vanguard of Islam. Now, I know I'm a little bit over time or running close to the end of time. What is the lesson for us in this? What is the lesson for us in this? This is an amazing story. In a story of a Sahaba that started out with a completely different trajectory and ended up going to a completely different trajectory. In life, we make mistakes. We make mistakes. We're human beings, and we definitely make mistakes. But just like Ikrimah radiallahu anhu recognized his mistake, he made a pledge. He made a pledge that whatever mistake I made, I am going to undo it. Or rather, I am going to do something to compensate. Something to compensate. And finally, the way he undid whatever wrong he did was he basically, whatever wrong he did, he made sure he did something to obliterate it, or basically to, in lieu of that. Okay, the point that I'm trying to make is he fought with them as a non-Muslim, then he fought on the sides of the Muslims. So for example, if I were to do something wrong, I should find out how, as a Muslim, I can do something similar to compensate what I did. So if I use my eyes and I looked at things that I shouldn't have looked at, I should now use my eyes to do something that is involved in the deen, to read more Quran. If I use my tongue to hurt somebody, I should use the very same tongue that I used to hurt somebody to now be a source of comfort to somebody. If I use my money for the sake of haram, whatever wrong thing I did, I should now use that same money for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you remember, there was a very famous Pakistani singer. His name was Junaid Jamshid. Passed away a few years ago. And if you know his history, he was a very, very famous pop star, one of the most top singers in Pakistan. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guided him, and he became completely, his life turned around, and he got completely involved in dawah and tabligh. And one of the things, if you listen to some of his videos, he says one of the things that he wanted to do was he had an extreme remorse that he went to people and then, he drove them to music, made them basically dance, do all kinds of non-Islamic practices. So his goal was, I'm going to now go ahead and undo what I did by going to the same people and now preaching them Islam. So whatever stadiums and whatever studios or wherever he would go and he would sing with music and whatever he did in the past, he would now use the same platform to give the dawah. He would now use his voice, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given him, for singing nasheeds and calling people to Islam. And of course, mashallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him such a martaba that when he died, people came in throngs. You would think that this is the funeral of an amazing person. If he had just died as a pop star, probably nobody would have came to his funeral. Nobody would have cared about him. They would have said, okay, this huge pop star, he died, whatever. But when he did, when he turned his life around, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made him so beloved to people that people from all over the world flew to attend his janazah. So the lesson for us, my dear brothers and sisters, time is very limited. We live in a time of a lot of uncertainty. A lot of things are going on. We're seeing people who are young and healthy in front of our eyes become very, very sick, and some people are passing away. So our lesson from the life of Ikrimah radiallahu anhu is, number one, we shouldn't wait to do tawbah. Tawbah is something we shouldn't wait to do because we don't know when that time is going to come. Tawbah should be done immediately. And one of the best ways of making tawbah is to start doing good. Whatever wrong we do, we could almost use the same platform and start doing good. Start to replace that with whatever good that we can do. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq to do good. Tomorrow is Jummah, and unfortunately, a lot of us, perhaps most of us in the United States, are not going to be able to attend the Jummah Salah the way that we would normally would, right? The masajids are closed. So, you can see that now, even if you want to go to Jummah Salah, even if I want to go to the masjid, I'm not able to go. So we have to consider every and any moment that we get as a privilege. Going to the masjid, going to Jummah is a privilege. We would just, at the time that I could easily go to the masjid, I would sometimes feel lazy. But now, even if I have the free time, I want to go to the masjid, I'm not able to do so. So this is the time for us to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep all of us safe. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep all of us give us hidayah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala take us out of the current turmoil that we are on in absolute safety and iman. So inshallah, we will end with this. Tomorrow, inshallah, we will join at the same time. Jazakallah khair again for joining. I hope that you found this beneficial. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq to continue to worship Him. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep the entire humanity safe. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep the Muslims safe and the entire humanity safe. The humanity is suffering as a whole. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us a cure for this disease. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala get this disease completely out of our lives. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillah bil alamin. Jazakumullah khair. If there are any comments or questions, again, we can take that. If not, inshallah, we can go ahead and end. Jazakumullah.